Hey, welcome back. This video is going to be just looking at the Old World Development Diary they put out a couple of days ago. This one here, it's going to be talking about the Empire for the most part. And we do get confirmation about what the setting is. It's officially been told or written down now that the setting is 200 years before the old times. We'll get to that in a moment. And that it's going to be set just before the Great War against Chaos, or like just as it's building up or something. I don't know the specifics about the. So they do again confirm that they are going to make the game based on, sorry, multiple editions of Warhammer Fantasy. I've heard them say, or heard somebody say at some point, that they were going back as far as third edition. For my guess is they'll pick a more modern edition, like seventh, as the basis. Because that's probably the more recognizable period. That's like, going back 20 or so years, going back to 7th and 6th edition, which were pretty similar. And then they'll just kind of tweak it from there. That makes sense. We also get some more Empire art. We got a flagellant. As we scroll down, we get an archer and probably a Free Company militia trooper. And they also confirm that there is no retcon happening. I mean, I think this was already confirmed, or at least it should have been assumed that this was how it was going to go. So if there's anybody out there still thinking that the old world is going to get saved and that there's going to be a retcon or like a time divergence, as it stands, that's not happening. The old world's gone. Um, I would never assume that it can't happen, but right now, there's no reason for them to do a time split, like a multiverse nonsense, time travel, whatever, and change it because Age of Sigmar seems to still be doing well. They're still making stuff for it. So I can't imagine that's going to happen, and that is what they say right here. The old world was destroyed. They get into the Great War against Chaos. This was a period about 200 years before the end times, 2 centuries before the end times specifically, as they put here. And it's when I think Chaos made like its first big attack on the realms of men, trying to bring the end times. And it was led by Asavar Kul versus Archaon. And it led to the Siege of Prague, which is a big part of Warhammer lore. And yeah, it sort of is a period that's, for a short amount of its timeline, it's quite well detailed, but like everything around it's still sort of like the vague. Um, and then in this year this happened, and this year this happened, and there's not a lot of like details about those. There's details about the Great War, but not much about either end of it. And I think that's why they chose this. It makes the most sense to me. As they put here, if they went too far back, like for the Beard or Sigmar's period, it wouldn't look like Warhammer. The Empire would look like kind of like Marauders versus State Troopers. So it doesn't make sense as a starting point for a new game. You want the old players to come back with their armies. And then we get into the Civil War. So they do tell us that um, they've told us already above here that this game is going to be set just before the Siege of Prague, some years before, as Asavar Kul is building up his forces. And in that period, the Empire is fighting itself because the um, the Emperor is dead and nobody can decide on who's going to take over. So there's several hundred years, it says, of different, claimants to the imperial throne, people having just a big nationwide civil war. And they just sort of destroy themselves. I think this might be around the same time we see Vlad come out. Um, Don't quote me on that. I'd have to go like look at that stuff again. But I do believe Vlad was actually quite a bit before the end times as well. He just keeps coming back. But this is like the Vampire Wars around the same time. Um, yeah, and then they just get into the four main factions. The Barony of Westerland gives us a little bit of information on each. This one here is over on the far western side. You see places like Marienburg, which I think at the time was still part of the Empire. Then you have the Grand County of Osterland, that's the more northern provinces. And we see that Middenland and I guess that's probably Middenheim over there. They are all part of this. These are actually one of the cooler parts of the Empire, I think, because while they share uh, the Sigmarite belief system, they're actually more focused on Ulrich. So I think that's a good like. There's going to be probably some cool stuff coming out of there. Um, Wolf Riders and stuff, I think, or units that have like maybe some wolves incorporated, which was never played on enough in older fantasy. I think it always should have been. Then we have Principality of Reichland, Altdorf, and the more like imperial parts. This little image here is actually super interesting, by the way. Um, so we have Altdorf, and this is Karlberg, and this might be around the time I think that this happened. Altdorf and Middenheim got into a fight, and Middenland, sorry, um, and Reichland, and Karlberg was taken by Altdorf, and the Karlberg Great Swords Regiment, they wear red livery, like their whole uniform is red because during a battle they basically held off the Middenland army, all but single handedly, to the point where they fought so long and so hard that their white uniforms were completely red from all the blood. And I think even though Karlberg was eventually retaken by Middenland, it doesn't matter because I'm pretty sure what happened is that Karlberg great swords were transferred to basically Altdorf and became a permanent Reichland regiment. Or at least, they were like, they stayed in Karlberg, but maybe they were like sort of on call for Reichland as sort of like a recognition of that period. I forget exact details, but it's a cool little bit of the fluffy lore in the background. But that's not the interesting part. I got distracted there. The interesting part is this. So in this area, the Empire and Bretonia both have built huge fortresses by the end times. But I think even back in this period they had them because Bretonia and the Empire were always fighting over areas like this, and Bretonia always wanted to expand into Reichland and other parts of the Empire. So seeing um, these red dotted lines tells me that these are battle lines where different factions are holding their territory. Seeing the Bretonia group here, faction Pavan. Well, I guess sorry, that's the leader, Pavan the Fourth. Um, pushed up this far. This tells me that this is going to be a big spot of where Bretonia is introduced. Is going to be just sort of taking advantage of the Civil War. And I don't know, I think that's cool. I think seeing that up there, a way to kind of introduce Bretonia to Imperial Civil War more directly than just being way over here and sort of circling around towards Marienburg, which I'm sure is also happening because they always try to take Marienburg. But it's nice seeing that they have an idea here that they're way close. Um, right around here, actually, somewhere is that city that Vermintide takes place in, or nearby, anyways. So yeah, that's pretty cool. Then you got the Grand Duchy of Tallebeck. This is like Stirland and Talabicland and all that over here. Although Stirland seems to be separated, so I'm not sure what the red lines mean. I assume it's like a separation of different factions, but they um, they did mention above that Talabec land and Stirland were together in this, so I don't know. We'll see. But yeah, they basically tell us that the old world is coming, the Empire is in a bad state, centuries of civil war. They say that there's beastmen, that there's orcs. Um, we can see that the Bretonians are obviously licking at the heels there. And then we got other stuff like ancient kings. There's, are sitting on crumbling thrones and they want to come take the land of the living. So that to me sounds like Tomb Kings, but it also probably could be vampire counts. There's all kinds of stuff they can do here. Plus, of course, Asivar Kul is getting ready to come down. And then there's all the allied groups, like we can expect dwarves and elves and whatnot. So yeah, um, this was a really nice update. This one was very in depth on the lore. It really gives us a good idea of what's coming, and I'm excited to read this stuff. Even if the game is terrible, it looks like I'm going to have a lot of good reading ahead of me. So, anyways, thanks for watching. If you have any thoughts or comments, please leave them down below. And as always, have a great day.